Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grit Holistic Living. Generation Z, Miss Naomi Campbell as our special guest as we speak about everything next chapter. It's about whole health, whole life, and whole you. And indeed, you matter. That means your decisions matter, and every chapter in your life, in our journey called life matters. And here to unpack it is Miss Naomi Campbell. And Naomi, thank you so much for joining us in our little oasis. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I wanted to have Generation Next before any other generation because it's important to highlight for the audience that every chapter matters. Let me tell you a little bit about Naomi Campbell. She is a journalist, a writer, an author, aspiring author, an educator, content creator, and so much more. That's girls. So she's going to dissect it a little bit. So again, welcome.
Thank you.
It's the month of March, and we say rebirth, renewal, rejuvenation. So how did the month of March meet you, and how are you taking steps to be renewed and be part of this rejuvenation?
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much again for having me.
You're welcome.
And the warm welcome. I'd say for the month of March, also being a follower of your content as well, very inspiring. And I would say, just trying to regroup and think to myself, okay, how do I want to position myself for the new year? And what does that mean? Especially from a worldly stance. The new year, essentially, people say starts in January, but trying to grow more in my faith and even learning from my faith what the new year actually signals and where it represents or starts is March. So just thinking to myself, okay, even seeing some people online and their understanding of the new year as far as, okay, no, it doesn't necessarily have to start in January. It could start at any point, really, but thinking of it from March standpoint. So I'm just trying to give myself grace, most importantly, during these different periods. And I would say for the month of March where it's meeting me, I know through my introduction. So about 2 years ago, I left the classroom to pursue journalism, and now still navigating the job market. As far as that grace, what I've been telling myself is I'm not unemployed. I'm navigating the job market because words are so powerful. And I'm trying to remind myself, even as you said in my bio says God's girl, remind myself who I am, who I belong to, and trying to think to myself, okay, these are the promises He told me, and if I keep that, his word doesn't go back null and void. And if I remember that and keep that at the very center, even on those difficult days. Yesterday was a difficult day, I will be honest about that, just as far as just thinking where I am professionally, but knowing, okay, we're in March, we're not in December, and even if we were in December, that's okay too.
In terms of our podcast, in the month of March, our introductory theme is about marching for Greg and Grace. As Generation Next, your group, your generation was pretty much you born with the phone and technology in your hands. So talk to us a little bit about the noise coming from social media. How can you dim the noise a little bit, or and then move forward in terms of a decision that you have to make for yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say I'm thankful enough to have friends where they also know when to take a breath, and they encourage we encourage each other to do the same, whether that's from just taking social media breaks. Even if you have a professional account, one of my friends, I really enjoy her platform and what she does on her platform as far as just spreading media literacy, but she's also took a break for some time too. And that's so important because you're allowed to regroup, and especially in this digital age, even with the conversation between influencer versus content creator, just understanding your place in social media. But then there's social media, but then there's also your personal life on social media as well. And trying to find that balance of, okay, this is where I'll post for my friends to see, but on a professional standpoint, I might have to navigate different posts or captions differently. So it's just a matter of taking some time to reflect and think to yourself, okay, you know what? I've been spending too much time on social media, whether that's using a certain app to decenter and regroup so you can focus on other projects, or putting on a timer saying, okay, you know what? I'm only going to use social media today for 2 hours, and that's it for the day.
Absolutely. Having media and technology work for you. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing in terms of content creation. Now, my understanding, you have your own magazine. You started from Syracuse?
Yes.
Okay, so tell the audience a little bit
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. So at Syracuse University, I founded a magazine called Fusion, and it's supposed to represent the narratives of the African, Black, and Caribbean diaspora. And I know some people, they might think to themselves, why do you feel the need to mention all three? Why can't you just say the global Black diaspora? And I have transitioned or shifted the introduction slightly. So now it does say the global Black diaspora, while also as I follow through before I conclude my introduction is that it's supposed to represent the narratives of the African, the Americas, and the Caribbean and beyond. Because unfortunately, because of the transatlantic slave trade, I noticed that depending on the context, some people, even though they do belong to the Black diaspora, they feel as though they're not actually included. For whatever reason, there's a lot of diaspora wars, for lack of a better word. So I feel as though having that in the introduction or whenever I am addressing Fusion on whatever platform, having that in the bio and even in the videos as a reminder that you are visible and seen, especially the and beyond part, allows individuals to think to themselves, okay, what does the global Black diaspora truly mean? And I was really fortunate to work with undergraduate students while I was at Syracuse. And as a former teacher, for me, that was important because I think the younger generation, even though it was probably 4 years older than them, I still saw them as kids, for lack of better words, but I learned so much from content creation, just pitching ideas. And then I learned, okay, you know what? This doesn't just have to be a written platform or where we just see narratives. Storytelling is also through photographs. And I'm just so proud just to see how within 1 year, we were able to have our first print issue. But then beyond that, now they're coming out with their first film. And I welcome that, yes, I might have been the founder. I am the founder, but you guys are so instrumental as well to the growth of Fusion and for later years to come as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that concept about inclusivity because part of it is that individuals, as you said, the diaspora wars online, some individuals feel left out. So I totally hear you on that. And then, of course, we're talking about being able to lay the foundation and that each generation should be doing better than the other generation. So that's a beautiful thing indeed. So expound a little bit in terms of the next steps for you. What does that chapter look like? As a holistic leadership coach, I advise my clients, the person who you are today may not necessarily be the person you are tomorrow. So tell us about uncovering to discover that purpose, if indeed you have found it, and what that next chapter looks like as you continue to navigate the globe. Because I know you're also a global traveler. We get into a little bit about that as well.
Oh, no, that's a very thoughtful question. Thank you so much for asking. I would say, as far as the next steps, and even I think that's a great verse to unpack as well and frame the question too, because I always like to think back to the story of Abraham and Sarah, because even in my own life, sometimes I think, oh my gosh, I passed a certain age. I can't access this. I can't receive this. But when you're not patient, as you see, even with their story, you have your issues, your Hagars, you have these situations essentially.
Right,
that,
make decisions.
You make decisions on your own. But when God says, no, this is what I have for you, this is what I named to be yours. But the beautiful part is he's so merciful and gracious. And even going back to what you've talked about before, as far as you still have the breath of life, you still have time to improve, to ask for forgiveness and just move forward. And so what I try to remind myself is, and I created a vision board when I was about 15 years old. And sometimes I do have these moments where not necessarily I grapple, but I try to figure out, okay, God, how can I still center this around you? And I also don't want to play God either and act like I know what he wants for my life, but through that discernment, through these moments, confirmations, I think that might be a better word, where I meet people or have these conversations where I didn't share something with someone, and God uses people to show us what our purpose is and remind us. And I've had those moments. I think, okay, you know what, maybe this is aligned. And the most beautiful part, going back to, I think they say it's delayed, not denied. And what I love about that, even with detours when you're driving, you still get to your destination.
That's right.
You might take a long time to get there,
That's right.
but he still brings you there. And then the beautiful part is sometimes with those detours, he reminds you, okay, you know what? If you did go this way, the way you wanted to go, you might have encountered an accident. And an accident could be a metaphor for an obstacle that you probably didn't even need to encounter, or maybe he did want you to for whatever reason, for it to be a learning experience.
And so tell the viewers a little bit about your global travels and what you have learned. And maybe we'll have time for that expose you did in South Africa.
Yeah, so I love talking about travel. Very fortunate to have had some opportunities. I would say one of my first trips that really opened up my mind to there's tourists and then there's travelers. And I love the idea of being a traveler because you can go to a new country, a new city, and experience what tourists desire. You might want to go to that famous pizza shop. You might want to stand in front of that statue. But when you try to immerse yourself, I think that's such a great word, immerse yourself with the locals, the history and the culture, you find yourself leaving. Parts of you stay in that country. And it changes you as a person as well, especially when you're able to meet friends across the globe. And I really appreciate that. And one of my favorite trips I always look back to is my trip to Zanzibar. And it changed my life so much as far as how I wanted to approach travel. And when I went to South Africa, I remembered that trip in Zanzibar and I told myself, okay, I have 3 months here, or the whole entire summer I'll be in South Africa. How am I going to not necessarily mimic this experience, but make it my own and come back as not necessarily a new person, but with new information, new knowledge, new friendships, and how is this going to change the trajectory of my life, so to speak, through a transformative way, because I genuinely wanted to learn about this new culture that I'll be experiencing for the summer. And it changed my life. I literally cried, I think, each time I was at the airport while I was in South Africa, because it was truly just such a beautiful experience for me.
Right. And I think it's very important to also underscore, if you could be so kind to share with the audience, how did you celebrate your father's, was it 60th birthday?
Yeah.
So share with the audience in terms of how that transpired and what was the planning behind that.
Yeah, so my dad celebrated his 60th birthday in South Africa. We were specifically in Johannesburg, and my parents decided to come visit me while I was there for the summer. So they came in July after I spent a month in Cape Town. And I know my dad loves Nelson Mandela. Ever since I had any sort of recollection or remembrance of on our dining room table, in one of the stories that I wrote for my editor, and I always said there was a spot specifically reserved on our kitchen table for Nelson Mandela's book, A Long Walk to Freedom. It never moves. It's in the same spot.
Yeah.
And I just always remember that. I personally, unfortunately, never read the book myself, but my dad is such a huge, I don't want to use the word history nerd, but he loves history. And just being immersed in understanding other people's cultures as far as just his position in the world, but then how should he navigate the world now based on his lived experience, but also the experiences of others. And I would say I just thought one of the best ways for him to celebrate his 60th birthday, which coincides the same day as Mandela Day, I said he has to go on the tour of Soweto. And Soweto is the largest township in South Africa. And so he was able to go to Vilakazi Street, where that was the home of Nelson Mandela, and former Archbishop who was passed. I can't remember the exact year, but Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I just thought that was such a great way. And then the locals were able to sing him happy birthday. He was able to try traditional South African food, ikota, I think that's what it's called. It's essentially a fat sandwich, and it's a quarter loaf of bread that they cut, and they just fill it with different ingredients from lettuce, cheese, tomato, and then bologna, what we know as bologna. So yeah, and I just thought that would have been such an amazing way for him to spend his 60th birthday immersed in history and just culture.
So now as we close out, what would you like your generation to take away from your experience in regards to next chapter, and really understanding that every chapter can be a holistic one?
Mine is, it's never too late. And I had mentioned Abraham and Sarah before, and my story always resonated with me for some reason. And I think part of it is because it's just such a beautiful reminder, even through their mistakes or their decisions, that God still said, no, this promise. And I love that, because there are promises. Each of us, we all have promises God told us. And we have to hold on to those because no principality, no man, no one can take that, not even ourselves. Even if we just did everything wrong according to the worldly sense, if God said, no, my daughter, my son, this is what I have created for you, specifically for you, that it will not be taken away. And I just want people to be reminded of that.
Okay.
I think that was a reminder.
So at the end of the day, family, we just concluded our very first episode of Grid Holistic Living. And if you didn't know, GRID stands for Grounded in Faith, Renewal of the Mind, being intentional every step you take, and of course, being disciplined. Having said that, we pray that you come back to us as we feature more great individuals around the globe as we consider what's going on. And just remember, it's all about whole life, whole health, whole you, and about remaining grounded in faith. And indeed is not what's next, but you got next. You got next, young lady.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, family.
Thank you so much for having me.